But you.
So there are people. So good afternoon, good morning if there are people from YouTube following us in the US. Thank you for being with us. There will be people arriving, but at the same time we have a distinguished panel. Some of them they will need to leave a little bit earlier, so we will start. Thank you for being with us. It's an honor to have such a distinguished panel in such an important case, question, deprivation of liberty. You have the titles, and I think you know most of them, so we won't present them because they are well known. I would just say a few words about what's the link between them and the issue, deprivation of liberty. We have been deprived of liberty. No, that's a joke. In different contexts, of deprivation of liberty. So let me present myself. I'm Alex Cavarotos. I'm the director of DCI. But for this meeting, I am the chair of the NGO panel, together with my friend here, which you can present yourself also.
Nice. Thank you, Alex. Nice to meet you. My name is Yann Colliou. I'm the head of Access to Justice sector at Terre des Hommes.
And he will be co-moderating with me. We will see if we will manage. Then we have the honor to have Najat. She doesn't need the presentation. I just want to say one thing, that Najat arrived some 6 years ago, and when she was arriving, the global study was just about to be published and to be presented to the General Assembly. So we know Najat from many other positions and so on, but for us, today, she is the one who came with a global study at the UN as Special Representative of the Secretary General and chairperson of the UN Task Force on Deprivation of Liberty. So you are here with this hat. Feel free to speak as you always do. Then, thank you, Najat. Then we have Atiano with us. So Atiano is a very ally for us as civil society, but also for the justice sector. She's the director of the Legal Empowerment Fund. And she will give us some very interesting aspects of how justice for children and deprivation of liberty are implemented in the field and how we can act on it. Then we have also with us, this is a better view, we have Anne Skelton, just recently chairperson of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. But today she's here because also she was co-author. She drafted some of the chapters and worked a lot for the realization of the global study. And she was also with this hat today here. Then, of course, we have the main author, in all sense, so Professor Manfred Novak, who is the author of the global study on Children Deprived of Liberty. He's with us 6 years after, and he will share with us a lot of things. And then we have Benoit van Kersblik, who is the director of DCI, but he is here as member of the CRC currently. And he will speak to us on what we can do for the implementation of the global study recommendations and of the road that we are speaking today. in the context of the CRC and how we can all together help. So with this, I will stop the introduction. Perhaps we give the floor to Najat and then to Jan. So because Najat has to be in several places at the same time, she's the only one who can make this. So Najat, my question to you is, as I explained to you, you came together with a global study. You have a...
They will leave with the global study.
I recall in that. That's another story. It's not on the agenda. I didn't ask. But if you want, you can speak also. So we are online, YouTube. There is the Secretary General of the UN following everybody. So your office, you have been instrumental in fight against violence against children. We know that deprivation of liberty is one form of violence against children, and you see it like this. That's why it's, for us it has been a gift during the 6 years that you are heading the UN Task Force on Children Deprived of Liberty, entrusted to implement from the UN side the global study. So tell me first what you see, how you see the coordination going on for the point of view of your office, I mean, including all the UN agencies, and how we can advance. And secondly, regarding to the roadmap that we are now having a draft and we're trying to finalize together by the mid-June, is how a tool like this can help all the stakeholders, governments, UN, civil society organizations, academia, advance towards the implementation. That's what we want. We don't want global studies for the academia. We don't want for the story. We want it to be implemented with all the recommendations that Manfred has included. The floor is yours.
So I will try to be short. 6 years.
Please, sorry, technical. Please speak up. I know you can because of the YouTube transmission and the noisy group.
Okay. 6 years after, I think if you allow me, I want really to build on the lessons learned, if you allow me, and it will respond to your question. You know, when I arrived, with this global study and, with this block of recommendation, and it was one question, how the UN task force that was established will work on it. And in the beginning, you have UNICEF, you have, UNODC, IOM, UNHCR, but we, CRC, CAC, and we bring more and more people from all, the UN system. Why we brought all the UN agencies? Because the issue of children need to be duly mainstreamed within all, these agencies. This is one. The other things that we are working on silo. And here each one is delivering the guidelines, this comments, this, and for us it is really important because our target are states. And to make sure that when we are speaking, in a logical manner and making sure that deprivation of liberty, not only detention, but also institutionalization. This is very important to keep it in mind. Regarding, and also all the administration of justice, that is very important, but also all the arbitrary detention, because you have all these people, children who are, detained in some places because of security ground, because of, fighting terrorism and so on. And it was, very frankly, and in the beginning, is to make sure that when we are dealing, with child protection, the big umbrella, alternative to detention, deprivation of liberty has to be seen as a huge violence really against children. So, and it starts well, to be very frank, regarding, during, country visits, meetings with, states. Within the UN task force, we start working, how we can follow. And we did many policy briefs, many things, but I am not going to focus on the list of production we did. I think it's more about the results. I think what is important is really when you are, and it will be linked to your roadmap, when you are at country level. I think if we need to make a difference, it's really at country level. When you are, in a country visit, mobilizing the whole UN country team, including the RC, this is very important, and the civil society organizations, this also is another point, is to make sure that we are, when we are speaking about child protection system, justice is in sight. This is very important because we had many discussions before, when you have child protection system and justice was there. So to make sure that justice is part of the child protection system in its wider sense. This is one. The other thing is also pushing for having, making sure that the justice system, the minimum age of criminal responsibility, because currently we are seeing also a decrease regarding minimum age of criminal responsibility currently because of security reason, so this is also another issue, how we can make sure that security reasons are not used really to criminalize more and more children. This is another point. Another point, it was also dealing not only of, regarding detention, jail, but also many countries are speaking about, we have no detention of children. We have rehabilitation center. And when you visit, these are jails. So it's really important to be very careful how we are using the word rehabilitation. And what I discovered, very frankly, during the country visit, it's also many, in Europe mainly, you have more and more also some re-educational center under the Ministry of Education, because children and mainly adolescents have this risky behavior. And it becomes crazy also. So it's another issue that we need to deal with. I'm just, sharing with you all the lessons learned. Another point that was for me really important is regarding also all the proceeding and the administration of justice. That is one also of the block of the recommendation. And here is why we are discussing how children are listened, how we are really dealt with them, how their voices are taken into account and so on. So for me, regarding what happens, it's really, we are seeing, more and more countries who are speaking about alternative to deprivation, restorative justice, diversion in a good way. But in the same time, and here is linked to what we want to do, sorry, I'm not following your one too, regarding also currently this community-based rehabilitation program to avoid, detention. And I just came back from Papua New Guinea, and they are doing it using the religious and so on. But the problem is, we have to be very careful, it's also how you can empower these communities, these local communities really to deal with this issue. Another point that really was, we dealt a lot regarding, this is the alternative to institutionalization. And currently it's huge. It's going in many, many countries, to be very frank, and we need to focus on it. Not only jail, but the institution, because you have many children who are in institution because they are poor, because they are orphan or not, and because they have disabilities, or because of social disparities, because you have the judge who use very, very quickly family separation and put these children in institution. And the problem currently, you have many and social care reform worldwide in many countries, in Europe, but also in Africa, in Asia. And to be very careful within the social care reform, how the alternative to institutionalization are put in place. And it's linked to justice again, because it's the judge who decides really who is going to be removed, who is going to be placed. And here also it's another big issue regarding mainly the foster family. I just want to come back to that. Foster families, I am seeing more and more foster families in many countries. Some are duly, empowered, but some are not. So we have to be very careful if we are switching from one system to another system who is worse. Another point that is really important for me is regarding all the security grounds. And here it's increasing. Not only regarding children who were in the camps in Syria, but currently what we are seeing that, and you have many examples in Latin America, but not only, when you have children because of security, because they are part of gang, because we are building jails and we are treating these children as criminals, just to let you know. And I think we have to be very careful regarding these trends, and it becomes very fashion. And you have also outsource of jails currently, and between US and Salvador, and Honduras is going to do the same, but we are seeing this, increase.
Europe is doing the same.
I am coming to Europe. And another point, we were fighting a lot in the beginning, and we were happy, deprivation of liberty of migrant children. And we were advancing. To be very frank, within the Global Compact on Migration, we were advancing a lot, and suddenly, currently, and mainly again in Europe, regarding these policies and political things that they are adopting when we have, again, children deported or children, in
retention, they say.
No, they told they are, in a rehabilitation center and so on. So I think here is what I am seeing. You have some progress, but you have also a strong pushback. For me, the conclusion we have when we are dealing and link it to your roadmap and regarding all, is really how we can involve the grassroots organization. I think it's really very, very important. We cannot arrive and telling this is the way to do. Another point that is very important is all this community-based organization and also using justice and all the Congress and all things that are going on to make sure that this is seen as part of justice. Because currently we are seeing also justice telling we are not going to deal with that and it will be the Ministry of Social Welfare or something that have not the power and the capacities to do it. So we are losing, children between the both. And my last point, what I saw and globally in many places is the voices of children. And children are not listened. In many cases, they are not heard. And their concerns are not taken into account. So just to let you know, regarding the UN task force, we decided, given the current crisis and the pushback, and in 12 June we have a meeting regarding how we will be more strategic and how we will be more action-oriented, not only producing guidance and so on, but also sharing that it's possible, this is very important, following the Bogota conference also, that it's very important, within the 44 countries currently under pathfinding, but also sharing and showing that it is possible, because you have some countries who are doing it, so we can make it and we can push. I will stop here.
If you want to invite the NGO panel, we will come.
No, you will be invited, because what is important, and we did it, what is important is really to have you on board, to go together, but to use your roadmap, how we can use it also to not only as a roadmap, but really to see what is going as a tool. For me, this is very important.
Thank you very much, Najat. We inverse a little because Najat needs to go to another event, but if there are any questions to Najat, we will take them now before we go to the other speakers. Manfred, including from the panel, of course.
Yeah, thanks very much, Najat, and I agree with everything what you said, but 6 years after the publication of the final study, we found it's at the minimum 7.2 million children deprived of liberty in all kind of different institutions, criminal justice system, migration, detention, etc. What is your conclusion today? Are there more children deprived of liberty today or less children? What kind of data does the task force have? Can we kind of conclude that the study had an impact or not? Is there anything that the UN, the different UN agencies that are in the task force have actually collected? Because as you know, the main recommendation was we need data. And we need ideally snapshot data. So every year at a certain date, all states should be required by the UN Statistical Office or UNICEF or whoever to actually provide data. How many kids are now in pre-trial detention, in prisons, in migration detention centers, etc. So it's not a huge issue to do it if there is the political will to do it.
I will respond.
If I can add something to Manfred, in the same question, not only from the global study, but the global study, as you know, is the third study. So you are working also on the 2006, 20 years ago, study on violence against children. There was the Gracia Marcel report and so on. So also from this experience of the different global studies and their implementation that you are working with, how we can accelerate and not wait 20 years to have some results, and how we can monitor results, which is Manfred's question.
The problem is that we start by estimated data, just to let you know. And this we are working on estimated data. Regarding, the issue of collecting information and having data, it's not an easy task, and you know it. Even for those countries who are UN, who are at country level, because it depends on the country, this is one. The other thing, it depends on collecting this information. And if I come back to violence, to date, you have still many children who are not reporting, not because of lack of data, because of many other issues, lack of child-sensitive complaint mechanism, because of stigma. Regarding coming back to, and we have some information regarding some forms of violence in, for example, even online, you have only child sexual abuse material, but you have not all the other issues related to other forms of violence against children. So we have a big issue regarding collecting data. Regarding, the issue related to deprivation of liberty, you have some information from some states who are, transparent and really, very frankly, giving you who are pre-trial detention. This is what I can collect when I am at country visit. This I have. Regarding, bringing all, the UN system to provide you information regarding, it's not an easy task. And I am very frank regarding that. We have many difficulties to collect this information. And it depends, again, on the state. What is the impact? It will be very difficult for me to tell you this is positive impact or bad impact, but I think what is important, this global study, and it's important to remind that this global study was done, just to let you know. And it's not only me who have to do it, and you know what I am, about what I am speaking. So I am putting it in the agenda, not in a parallel sense, because it will be crazy to ask the state what this is violence, this is the UN task force, this is UN women. You know what I am telling. But I think what is important is the way we are collecting data. And what is becoming, you can have regarding the official detention center, but when you arrive to the rehabilitation center, to the children who are under security ground, and all these, children who are in pre-trial and not, for the moment not judged, it's very difficult, to be very frank regarding that. And I agree with you. We need to push to have more and more. And even when you are pushing and collecting the data, it's the data given by the official, and these are not reflecting the reality, to be very frank. But I agree with you that we need to push state to deliver more data, not only to rank them or to shame them, but also to show the progress made. And it's the way, but it's the way we are selling it. Just I want to let you know, regarding some countries have data and they don't want to show it with, the UN system. Because the way we are dealing, and it's a big negotiation regarding that, because we have to be very careful how we are going, if we need states to give us this data and to make sure that they are reliable and so on, it's also the way we are selling, this data, it's also how we are measuring the progress. For example, I was in, recently in, I don't remember where, it was in South Africa with the Minister of Justice, and I had the opportunity to have the data, and I just was discussing, it was 42, I remember, 42 children in pre-trial detention. And they discussed, and these are petty offenses. They have not to be there. But, I think it's really important to make it systematic also at country level.
But has this call been done by the task force?
Yes, it has been done.
To all states in the world to provide every year, every second year on a snapshot date, those data that are required by the global study, so all the different types of deprivation of liberty.
No, it has not been done.
So if
it has not been done.
Perhaps there could be something for the 12th June meeting.
Because we need the both. Because what is important, we need deprivation of liberty and we need also the other forms of violence. I think it's important. We are asking for many data
But
at the same
violence
time.
is more difficult because you can't quantify it like this. But whether somebody is sitting in a migration detention center on a certain date or not, that can easily be found out. If I go to a state, I also find out, we were just in Bulgaria, and we got all the data.
Yes,
very
you can.
easy.
But when you are at country level, what I am telling you can. But in the same time, what I am telling, and I speak about the experience, and you know about what I am speaking. When you are asking state to give you, all these children who are in this rehabilitation center are not considered as detained. You will not have. But when you are at country level, when you are visiting, and this I do it, when I was in Poland, I go to the frontier to Belarus, and I saw, but in the beginning they have no things. And you know what I mean? I think it's really important to build this trust, to be on, on the board, and I am mobilizing the whole UN country team and civil society also to bring this information. But the issue is what we are going to do with this information, because if we need to push them to move ahead, if we are starting, telling Sierra Leone is the worst, we stop. All these things need to be stopped. I think it's really important what we need to move, what we need to achieve.
Thank you. This is, I think it's a very important question because we heard also UNICEF yesterday announcing the data, and when the people hear the data, or even if it's only an administration of justice, and they give a figure, it's important that this figure is reliable because we know that for the global study, Manfred, you recall, 1/3 of states only responded to your questionnaire sent by the Office of the High Commissioner. So this is important, and then you try to find the information from other sources. And that's why we arrived to the 7 million, over 7 million children overall. But otherwise, if you say it's only 200,000 because only the 1/4 of the governments responded, you have to emphasize that it's not because they say it. I think
you have to check at country level, and I think here is a role not only of UN. I think they have this role, but also the civil society organization. I think it's very important because currently deprivation of liberty in their mindset in many cases is only the children who are in jail.
A big applaud for Najat because all her children, not for intervention. Jan, we go to the second question.
Yes, let's go to the second question, Ms. Gando. What role do grassroots and community legal empowerment initiatives play in preventing child detention and ensuring access to justice for marginalized children?
Well, Najat just answered the question, so you can move on to the next one, but thanks for that question. But I'll first start off by explaining what legal empowerment is, because when people hear legal empowerment, they think it's lawyers and they think it's courts. And really, it's simply not about lawyers and courts. It's a transformative approach that combines law with organizing to build people's power in order for them to secure justice. Legal empowerment is about empowering communities and individuals to know the law, to use the law, and to shape the law in order to have agency so that they can actually secure their own justice. And this is really key when it comes to the context of child justice, because legal empowerment within that context involves community actors and is really rooted in enabling children and their communities to challenge injustices. So when we talk about legal empowerment, it's really looking at I as an individual, or we as community. It doesn't mean taking the lawyers out. And I admit I'm a lawyer by trade. And if you had ever said to me before that people should agitate for their own, should use the law to agitate for their own justice, I would say, no, that's the job of lawyers, because your average individual does not know that. Well, I'm a convert now, and I run the Legal Empowerment Fund, which is a new fund that funds legal empowerment initiatives globally, so funding grassroots communities and grassroots justice efforts globally. And as you heard Najat say, that the role of community groups, and I use it interchangeably because grassroots groups, community groups, they derive their mandate from the needs of community. And she made a really important and great point in terms of the fact that when we're looking at prevention of detention, we have to also look at communities. We have to look at community groups because they are the ones rooted within those communities. And when you look at what the roadmap that really emphasizes multi-sectoral accountability, community-led groups really play a big role because they're really they're positioned, especially because of the fact that they're rooted within the local context. Community actors are very uniquely placed because they actually encounter and are able to work with kids upstream before children encounter formal justice systems, and also downstream when we're looking at rehabilitation and accountability. And they also are the bridge between the legal aid and where there are gaps between legal aid, especially in rural settings, and especially in situations of conflict, of war, and migration, emergency context. That's where you find these grassroots actors, and that's why they play a really key role. And then, legal empowerment also really strongly aligns with the roadmap's priorities on strengthening legal pathways to justice. I've mentioned paralegals, and in many countries, you have paralegals or what we call barefoot lawyers or community advocates. And these are local individuals, again, rooted in their communities, and they provide trained legal assistance to communities and to children. And without them, without the barefoot lawyers, we're again missing out on documentation or information around children deprived of liberty. Yesterday at the plenary session, we had 2 youth advocates who mentioned restorative justice. I think it was Lax and Eileen. And community-based mediation is a really big form of bringing about restorative justice. And community-based mediation plus alternative justice mechanisms, these are very effective in de-escalating conflict, especially when you have like status offenses or minor infractions. ADR, alternative dispute resolution, you had the Supreme Court Justice yesterday's plenary, Ali Shah, talk about ADR as being a really important way and needs to be really brought into the realm of the child justice ecosystem. In Kenya, there's a very well-known civil society organization, Kituo cha Sheria. They started off as a very small grassroots organization, and now they are a very well-known civil society organization. And they have implemented legal empowerment programs that focus on community-based paralegals, ADR mechanisms, and this has actually been shown to reduce the reliance on formal detention for minors. And then there's also the training, not just for the justice workers themselves or justice actors, but for family members. And when we look at legal empowerment, it's really about a holistic and wraparound services. So it's not just saying just the law, but also bringing in and empowering the families of children to advocate for non-detention alternatives for their children. So, you know, when you look at the whole realm of it, I see legal empowerment as being encompassing everybody. So it's not just, you know, formal, but it also brings in informal, it brings in alternative. And there also, we've been talking about documentation, and documentation is really difficult. There was just a project that was launched before it was defunded by the executive orders, but it was based in Kenya, in Palestine, and in Myanmar. It was going to look at pretrial detention. And within Kenya, I was part of that project and looking at, can we get the data on pretrial detention, both for children and for adults? Government of Kenya made us jump through so many hoops, did not want to provide that information, especially around children. And so the place we went to was the communities, to the informal settlements. We went to the social justice centers, and they could tell you, we talked to community paralegals, they could tell you the number of children who have been arrested, where they are detained, which police station. And then we also had, there was a group of community advocates who also came to us and said, in this Makadara law courts, which is the busiest criminal court in Eastern Central Africa, in this Makadara law courts, there's a large number of children in pretrial detention. And that was something we didn't know. So we then went to the chief magistrate, who then said, I want a head count. So there's all this data that we are keeping. But the other thing is that a really tough part for, you know, when we were talking with the organization, with grassroots organizations, they said what happens is that a lot of bigger international organizations, they come, they take the data, and then we see nothing of it. And so there's that disconnect with, yes, collect the data, yes, create the policy, but if there's nobody to implement the policy because we don't know what you did with the data, then it's just a policy. So, you know, the role, and they do see themselves as being the community advocates for children, on behalf of children, but in so many times, they don't see that trickling back down to them, and so do not know what's the next step. How am I going to hold my government accountable after this? There's also a really big role they play in literacy and rights education. And that, again, is where the legal empowerment aspect comes in. If I know the law, I will use the law and I will shape the law. But I think, you know, in conclusion, since I know we're running out of time, you know, I would say that community grassroots organizations are really a key player when it comes to preventing child detention and access to justice. They're not just on the periphery, because their rights-based approach is also sustainable, because they're there, they're within the community. And this approach enables not just children, but children plus their communities to advocate for their rights and to hold systems accountable.
Thank you very much. So before we move to the next question, I'd like to jump on what you say regarding community and the pre-trial detention. So it is estimated today that globally more than 70% of detainees are on pre-trial detention, so before judgment. In some countries, we've been able to get some data, and according to these data, at least half of these 70% would have been or are eligible for a criminal mediation procedure. But unfortunately, there are very few means, and mediators also are accredited mediators to do it. So in some countries, like Burkina Faso, Mali, for example, and Mauritania, not now, but in the coming weeks and coming months, thanks to a bylaw which has been drafted recently in Mauritania, in Palestine, and we discussed that this morning. So in this context, for example, some community actors and customary actors have been trained to on criminal mediation, and prosecutors now can delegate criminal mediation to these people. And in this context, we observe that the number of children on pretrial detention since 2, 3, 4 years has dramatically decreased. So that's possible. And last words, because I'm not supposed to be a panelist, but last words, this is also...
Is it a question or a comment?
No, it's linked to the general observation of the CRC, because thanks to the general comment number 24 and thanks to the new one, now the CRC is inviting states to collaborate with customary and community actors, which was not the case before. So there is a good move for that. So I just wanted to point it out.
Yeah, absolutely a good move. There's also the problem of lawyers, because lawyers then feel that their bread and butter is being taken on one of them. And so there's a lot of pushback on the unauthorized practice of law, where they say, especially in the United States, that's a big issue, where there's a feeling that if these community actors are the ones involved in mediation, then it's taken away from lawyers' bread and butter, which is absolutely not the case. But there's that barrier, and a lot of bar associations have pushed back on this.
Thank you so much. Then the questions from the public will be at the end, please, as we have scheduled. It was for Najat because she had to leave, but we will keep space, don't worry. So Manfred, the floor is yours. You started alluding in some issues, but I wanted to ask you, as a lead author of these 750 pages of the global study, what do you see as significant achievements during these 5 years and a half? And what do you see as main gaps where we have to still work together to improve? An overall view.
I think I'm the wrong person to ask this question, because I am no longer UN expert, and there is no special representative of the Secretary General, like with the other two global studies, who is actually taking up exactly this role in order to disseminate the global study, to implement the recommendations, to get in contact with the governments, to ask for the data that I first asked to the task force. So what we are doing, and now I'm speaking as the Secretary General of the Global Campus of Human Rights, Manu Krishnan is sitting there, who is in charge of all the projects that we are doing. But those are, we did some 50 events, not only dissemination, but really following up. We have 25 projects because we are funded in this respect by Right Livelihood. Right Livelihood is this alternative Nobel Prize organization, a Swedish foundation. Without their funds, we wouldn't have been able to finalize the global study because states did not pay what they should have paid. 2 foundations were paying more than all the states together so that we could finalize the global study, and now it's this that we can follow up. But these are kind of, we go to a certain country in order to assist the government. We just do with UNICEF a study in Bulgaria, and as I just said, we talk to all the different ministries. We get all the data, it's not difficult to get them, and then seeing, has there been progress in Bulgaria, for instance, in de-institutionalization. There are only a few boys and 1 girl in the juvenile detention centers that they have there. That's certainly a big success compared to many years before. Deinstitutionalization, yes, there are about 80 kids now in these terrible boarding schools, which are much worse because they are for children from 8 to 18 years for antisocial behavior, whatever it is. It comes from the communist times. But still, they have managed to reduce it from thousands of kids to 80. But then they have smaller kind of institutions, and that's, again, it's true that they would say, no, they are not really deprived of liberty. If you look at them, in fact, they are deprived of liberty. So it's deinstitutionalization in the sense that the large institutions are going to be abolished, but the smaller ones are still there, and whether the children are much better treated, we have to see. The Minister of Education is much more difficult to actually allow us to have access to these boarding schools, and however they call them, than the Minister of Justice, which is very open. But that is one country. We do in Italy, for instance. Italy, I know, because we are based in Venice, and we are in close contact with all the non-governmental organizations, including DCI of Italy, that the situation is getting much worse under the Meloni government. So all the juvenile detention centers are really overcrowded. The situation, we were visiting one in Milano. We are offering to the government that we were assisting the government. That's what we can do. But I think what we would really need, as I said before, is reliable data, and I simply do not understand. The UN is requesting so many data, or the WHO, UNICEF, and all the UN agencies are requesting thousands of data from governments in order to, that is part of the UN work. Why is it so difficult to say you should actually provide those data on the deprivation of liberty of children? It is a major, and I agree with Najat, the global study on children deprived of liberty came out, it was a follow-up to the global study of Paulo Sergio Pinheiro on violence against children. Why? Because it turned out that the strongest and most structural violence is when they are deprived of liberty. So that's why NGOs and all the others, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, who all advocated for this global study, say we need a particular study because Article 37b is one of the really underused and under-implemented provisions of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It's really not taken seriously. If it says it's a measure of last resort, it means children should in principle not be deprived of liberty. Only if there's really no other alternative, because the kid is so extremely violent, has committed a very serious crime. But in all the other areas, you should think whether there are alternatives. And so it would not be that difficult, but in order to see whether there is progress, and we would like to have this roadmap so that hopefully the next World Congress on Justice with Children might be really dedicated to 10 years after the publication of the Global Study on Children Deprived of Liberty. And then I would really like to know, has there been progress or has it deteriorated? We are living in a world that is getting worse and worse. We have so many authoritarian regimes. She mentioned already El Salvador, but so many others. Migration detention in the United States is probably there much more today than there have been in 2019. In Europe, the same. We said migration detention can never be a measure of last resort. It should be abolished. I think Belgium abolished it recently, when I'm correct. So we have 2 EU member states, Ireland and Belgium. It's possible to abolish it. You simply have to do it. So, coming to an end, we do whatever we can, but we are not the United Nations. We need a close cooperation with the United Nations so that there is really a political will, not only of states, but also of the United Nations, to make the global study a success.
Thank you so much, Manfred, for coming back to many issues that we also touched upon. So the issue of data, of course, but there is also the issue of the mobilization and the coordination between the UN agencies. We will come back. We always will speak more about the roadmap and what we can do with it, especially because 2030 is not it's not only perhaps the next Congress. It will be also the SDG 16 report, and we will see how all this can be joined. Then we go to Benoit.
But point taken, Manfred, for the 6th World Congress. Thank you very much. The next question for Benoit. So Benoit, how can the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child more effectively address the growing number of children detained in the context of armed conflict and national security, including those accused of association with armed groups?
Thank you for this question, and maybe first of all I would like to mention that when I joined the Committee on the Rights of the Child 4 years ago, the global study was already published. I worked on it in a previous life and other capacity, but I have to say that the committee has taken the global study extremely seriously from day one, including in participating in the study itself, and in starting by putting questions to states before even the study was published, and to make sure that all these information that were needed for the global study were collected with not always a great success. We have to admit that. So before saying what we can do more, let's recall what we are already doing. So you all know that we are reviewing state, monitoring the implementation of the convention in the all the 196 states parties in the world, 197 should I say, because the United States is party on the OPAC and the OPS, the optional protocol, which gives us a possibility to ask questions on some aspects of deprivation of liberty. So we ask questions. We ask for data. And what you are recalling, the importance of data, we do ask for data, but let's be honest, we do not receive data, or we don't receive accurate, reliable, and verified data. It's always very difficult to assess who are we talking about, what is the context of deprivation of liberty, and very often it's very scattered. But anyway, this is our first approach. It's really questioning states about what they are doing, and trying to be more and more precise on what we are asking and what we want to know in this context. Then, of course, we have been publishing General Comment. General Comment 24 has been recalled, and we use it as a basis for our work. And we are also working on the next General Comment, and it has been recalled. There will be other workshop on that, General Comment 27. I will come back on that later on, because this is very important too. Then maybe also I should mention other means that we are using, like receiving individual complaint under the OPIC, Optional Protocol on Individual Complaints. But we don't receive many of those complaints for many reasons. It's not well known. There are too few ratifications, 53 states out of all the states, and probably the ones who need it the most, because their judicial system at national level is not strong enough, they haven't ratified it. So we have to continue working on that. A few recommendations that we are putting to states, and especially in the context of armed conflict and national security. First of all, recalling that those children have to be treated as victims, first and foremost. And even if they have been involved in some crimes, if there is a need to address this situation through a judicial system, it has to be a specialized justice system for children. And this is extremely important, because we see so many states that are still using an adult system for some of the children, 16, 18, and sometimes even earlier, or sometimes military courts, like we see it happening in the context of the occupied Palestinian territories, and this is now common practice by Israel. I should also recall, among others, one thing that we have been doing, and this was probably the last thing that Anne signed before leaving the committee on the 28th of February. The committee sent through her a letter to all the states that still have children in the camps in northeast Syria. We have been asking over and over to all states to repatriate them. We know the conditions. The conditions are dire. We have even said that it amounts ill treatment and torture. All the rights of the children are violated on a daily basis in that context, and still many states are reluctant to repatriate them. Some of them have done so, and with more or less success, and engaging also in reintegration and the work. Well, when they come back, we need also to focus and to give them a chance to recover what they have been going through. We have only received, I think there were more than 30 letters, 36 letters if I'm not mistaken. We only received 17 answers so far, so we'll continue following up, and with very few concrete and effective response. So it remains vague. We are doing our best, we are still trying, and or sometimes saying it's the mother who does not want the children to come back, and so on. But there is no concrete and effective try to repatriate them. We have been, of course, constantly reminding to the states that, as you recall, detention is a measure of last resort for a short period of time. That means that there should be something else instead of deprivation of liberty, and each time that there is a need to decide on limitation of the liberty, there should be regular revision of this decision in order to release the child and put in place other means and other response. And in this context, I think that it's very important also to make sure that the state understand that they have to put in place plans, strategies, with concrete action and activities, budget, and all what is needed to progress and to see a reduction of the number of children deprived of liberty. If we don't see this reduction of children deprived of liberty in one given country, that means that they are not putting in place what is required from them. Through the OPIC cases, we have issued a few decisions. I must admit that we don't have that many requests concerning deprivation of liberty in general, and more specifically concerning children in the context of armed conflict and national security. I mean, it's not surprising, as I said, those countries have not ratified the OPIC. But since this practice is used more and more in different contexts, we have put recommendation to countries like UK. It's not a good example because they didn't ratify OPIC, but we see use of deprivation of liberty for security reasons in countries that have ratified the OPIC, and still we don't see cases coming up to us. So this is a call for all the actors, all the lawyers, all the services that are supporting those children. Bring cases to us. We will support you in trying to address this issue and to recall the obligation of the state in this context. And so I think that we can certainly do much better, continuing doing that, but and trying to be more precise and identify the context of deprivation of liberty. What are the specificities? It's not exactly the same when we talk about El Salvador or UK or other countries like Nigeria. Each state is dealing with specific situation, There are commonalities, but there are specificities, and we need to be more precise and try to identify exactly what is done and what could be done much better. So we are committed to continue working in that context, and also, and that's my last word on this, it's to work on the link between international human rights legislation and international humanitarian legislation when it comes to the context of armed conflict. It's so important, and we need to continue working on that.
Thank you so much, Benoit. Perhaps a small follow-up on your answer. You mentioned that many of these countries in armed conflicts and national security are not, have not signed the OPIC, obviously, but they have signed the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Some of them they are not reporting, but there are some reporting, Israel, for instance. And also, regarding data, there is a special a report of the Secretary General is going to be out this month. Every year about violations, the gross violations or children, and data verified by the UN. So the committee is interacting in this context. How is doing with the member states that present reports and they are in this context, like Israel? And what are you doing with the data that exists at the UN level and verified data?
Yeah, so this is indeed a very good example. I was going to comment upon that through my second question. But indeed, we need to work more with the existing mechanism, the SRSG on children and conflict. We have a memorandum of understanding with this mandate, and we have to continue exchanging information. Not all information is public, you know. It depends when the report is published, but we need to use more this information and have a constant dialogue with this mandate. The same with other institutions, commission of inquiries. In many cases they have data, they collect data, and what we are doing in this context is trying to make sure that human rights are embedded in the mandate of those commission of inquiries, which is not always the case. It should be, you know, there is a policy at the UN level about mainstreaming children's rights in the UN system. So in those mandates, we should see more children's rights. There are other actors with whom we should work more. I'm thinking of the SPT, the Subcommittee on Prevention of Torture, that is visiting prison and detention centers in many places. The same with regional mechanism. In Europe, we have the Committee on Prevention of Torture. So I think that we need to work, Najat mentioned that, less in silos, working more together and exchanging the information that we receive. That's for sure.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure Anne, as former member of this, you will come back to this in your intervention.
I want to add to that. So
you can add, and then I will ask you. Then, yes, please add.
So actually, on this very last point, since Benoit came to the committee, he has been very committed in asking the connections with CAT and OPCAT. He asks every state whether they have a mechanism and whether they're visiting facilities where children are deprived of their liberty. And we've actually got a lot of new information about those connections. And then on the issue of children in armed conflict, what I think you can see from the committee's recent reports on Israel, the concluding observations coming out of Israel and the Russian Federation review as well, is that actually the committee is more than ever before using sources of information. So, for example, the SRSG's report was used and reference was made to Najat's office and not Najat's office, Virginia's office, and Israel was recommended to cooperate. And there were references made to UNRWA, and there were references made to the ICJ and the ICC for Ukraine, also to the Ukraine mechanism, the inquiry. So actually, I think that this is something, it's a new space and something that the committee's been quite strong on. And Benoit didn't he mentioned it sort of in passing that there'd been some cases, but there were a couple of important cases about the children in the camps in northeast Syria, where we were asked by grandparents living in France and grandparents living in Finland, family members living in Finland, that that those countries had violated the rights of the children in northeast Syria by not bringing them back. And this sounds maybe easy, like of course those countries should just bring them back, but to find that France had violated the rights of children who are living in Syria is actually in international human rights law difficult to do because of jurisdictional questions. But the committee really stuck its neck out and did do that, and actually found that jurisdiction wasn't a bar to France being told, bring your children back. So I think this is actually an area where the committee's been doing quite well. So
Thank you so much, Anne. And you are right, we have to underline also what is progress, because it's on this that we can forward. And another progress we can underline. 5 years ago, before your report, Manfred, I was speaking with the SRG on children armed conflict, and she was telling me, deprivation of liberty is not on my mandate, it's not on the list of 6 gross violations, which is true. But I was telling her, we were telling her as civil society, yes, madam, but it's directly linked to gross violations. For instance, when recruitment happens very often when the children are deprived of liberty, for instance, in Yemen, we have seen that. So today, in her report, she includes data on deprivation of liberty. So this is progress. So, Anna, back to you for a question on institutions. So one of the chapters of the global study has been on institutions. If we speak about administration of justice, that we don't have data on institutions, I think even less. But we have the impression as civil society that there is increasing institutionalization. And of course, whatever is institutional is not necessarily deprivation of liberty, but among them there is also still important numbers of deprivation of liberty. So how do you see any progress in this area? What are the main gaps and that are impeding us to make progress, and what we can do to implement? This is an important chapter of the global study, deprivation of liberty in institutions, and in the roadmap it will be included with important, I think, steps to follow up. So your advice will be very welcome. Thank you.
yes, well, actually, I think it's a bit of a mixed picture, the extent to which there have been improvements in this field. As we've heard from Manfred, he was just telling us about Bulgaria, where we can see that there is definitely some improvement. It is a field which is beleaguered by vague definitions and difficulty in getting states to acknowledge that children in residential care are deprived of their liberty, and difficulties around what is institutions, what are institutions, sorry, what do we mean by an institution? Is it defined by its features or its size or its, so it was a very difficult chapter within the global study. There were times I thought we were never going to get it done. But why is it so important? Because out of those 7.2 million children, it was between 5 and 6 million are deprived of their liberty in institutions. 5.4 million children were found to be in these institutions, and that was probably an underestimate because, as we said, states don't want to give the information. And so I think we're working always in a little bit of a sort of murky area, but I do think that the message has got across to states, at least to some states, that it's important to build your entire care and protection system. So really what it requires, which is challenging because it's big, is you've got to go for a whole system approach here. And you've got to be thinking about, first of all, preventing children from being separated from their families. And that can be as broad as providing decent housing, providing cash grants. It's very broad, it's very big. And it is part of what government should already be doing as its services, but it takes you into the realm of socioeconomic rights as well. So it's got a whole picture, whole systems approach. The advantage maybe is that this is work that UNICEF is working on all over the world as well, strengthening child protection systems. And so there is a lot of collateral work that's supporting and going into that, which I think is very important. So yes, it's preventing family separation, promoting family-based care, and supporting family-based care through, for example, cash grants to caregivers and support and advice and respite care and all of that kind of thing. Proper gatekeeping, so children come into facilities, but if they are there temporarily, they should be coming out quicker than they are, and ensuring that there are safe receptions back for children when they go back into community. So that's what a whole systems approach would do. The other important thing is holding states accountable around children in these institutions. They often will pass the buck and say, well, first of all, it's an area in which there's a lot of privatization. Well, this is also true for children in the criminal justice system, of course. But, you know, the states are trying to say, well, no, that's a church-run facility. We don't do that. And so this is another area, getting states to really accept this and to be accountable for it. And maybe I just want to tell one story of a case under the optional protocol on a communications procedure, which is a rather nice illustration. It is against Georgia, and in this instance, the Human Rights Defender for Children, which is sort of like an NHRI type of organization, had tried to get access to children who were in an institution, and she was refused access to get in. And so she went to court to get access to see the children, and ultimately a case was brought to OPIC to say that these children's rights had been violated, and that there needed to be some redress. And what came out of that, and I think this is very important around accountability, is it wasn't just redress for those children, but also Georgia was given recommendations on how to fix that system and how to ensure accessibility for people who are monitoring to be able to get into these facilities and to make sure that children are safe in these facilities as well. So I think that kind of accountability that we can see, and I'm talking about that at an international level, but I think we need to be seeing that more at a national level as well. And I think it would be good for us to look at internationally as what all the cases that have been brought that are around children in residential care, and what have the remedies look like, and could we strengthen those remedies and make them more systems changing. So really bringing us to the idea of using strategic litigation to hold states accountable and making sure that we get the systems changed that we do. Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
Which is really going back to Manfred harping on earlier, and I do understand it, I really do, I get it, about we need reliable statistics, but what we mean, I think, is we need comparable statistics. And it's no good saying, well, when they come to the Committee on the Rights of the Child, they provide statistics. And Najat was saying, well, when she goes down to the country level, they provide statistics. All good and well, but you cannot compare those statistics across different countries to see how is it going. You need a snapshot figure. Well, this is what we discovered as we were doing, because everybody was giving us a whole mishmash of ways of collecting statistics. How many children came into the prison system over the course of a year and came out again. Well, that's a completely different number from the states that collected on the 28th day of every month. And then at least you know what the snapshot is. And then they sometimes go, and the average over a year is this, but is that, can you? So I really do understand what you're saying. We can't just do this piecemeal approach of collecting data. And I think that is your frustration,
yes.
Isn't it? That's what you want.
Yeah, it's also a little bit, I should say, it's really exactly at the same time that UNICEF is in another room here presenting data that, according to UNICEF, the number of children deprived of liberty in the administration of justice is decreasing.
They mentioned it's just the top of the iceberg. And,
yeah, but still, they're saying, and she said it twice, it's decreasing, so we're making progress. And we don't know what these data are. And
they said it's very partial, very few states are responding.
But
so
I mean, she made this general statement.
Yeah, you're right. So we go to a second round of questions. You have more time to interact. We go back to Atiara for now. If you can keep it to 2 minutes, it will be great, because we have a limited time and we want to give questions for the public. Jan.
So, second question: how can the international community better resource and scale local civil society efforts that contribute to ending child deprivation of liberty and holding system accountable?
The honest answer is I don't know.
So
Next question. I think it's always resources, it's always money, and it's always a lack of resources. So I'll say it out loud. Yes, international community needs to put in more money. That said, there are also other ways in which they can help scale. And one of the things I think is bringing the grassroots and community groups to the table into official planning and policy spaces. Because a lot of the times they're seen as very peripheral, as not really contributing, not being part of core justice actors. But I think this lack of formal recognition is what also prevents them from accessing funding. One of the things that as a legal empowerment fund, lots of grassroots groups have said to us, you found us, nobody knew we existed. But the fact that you gave us just a bit of funding has then opened doors for us. So I think in many ways that's a really good way to help resource. The other thing is to really trust grassroots and community groups, because they're the ones on the ground and the ones doing the work. And within the philanthropic world ways, which is around which I circulate, is all this talk about locally led, everybody pivoting towards locally led organizations, but they don't, because there's a lack of trust. So I think quickly those 2 points for me is bringing them to the table and trust. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiano. And just to say that also go with Anne's response on accountability, what I believe that you spoke a lot on the grassroots and their results sometimes, but if what they're winning or their fights remain in the national, so what I think they can do at the international level, and apart from giving resources, is listen to their voice and help them on accountability, because the small grassroots organization in the field doesn't know what OPIC is, what is going in Geneva in the country. So what we should help is just give them the mic and listen, give them the floor to the international fora, to the international procedures like OPIC and others. Thank you so much. Going back to Manfred, looking for the future now, if you can speak a bit what you are expecting from the roadmap. You spoke about the UN and that we don't control under the current situation. We will see, things may change for the better or for the worse. But with this roadmap, which coincides also with SDGs, which try to build on good practices. Data could be one of the things that we will promote. We have an accountability chapter and in each chapter, apart from the overall roadmap, and I think that would be useful. What else can we do to do a better roadmap, which is a functional tool? It's not just a publication, and all of you have the possibility to give us feedback up to the 15th June when it will be finalized, so please do. There's the QR code and the draft that is available. Manfred, the floor is yours.
I think one thing, you could make it a little bit less comprehensive, because then it would be easier to be read. But I think in general, I think it's good to develop an idea of what do we want to achieve in these next 5 years. But again, I think we have to get away from a system where the main responsibility for dealing with children deprived of liberty by states rests with civil society. I think it's beautiful, and without the support of civil society, we would never had a global study. We would never be able to do all that here. But I think it needs to link stronger with the United Nations system. And I think, of course, I exclude from this statement, and I should have done it before already, the CRC committee, that you're an independent expert body. So what I mean is really the classical UN agencies. I think you should push the roadmap to the task force, but to the individual, it's all of them. It's UNODC, it's of course UNICEF, it's the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, for refugees, all those who are in there, that they feel more ownership. After all, it's a study that was commissioned by the General Assembly of the United Nations. So there must be some more ownership by the United Nations system for also taking this idea up. We would like to know 10 years from now. We would like to link it to SDG 16. Because we are talking about structural violence. So in all that, it needs to be better coordinated. I have a little bit the feeling that the United Nations agencies, and again, we know that the UN is heavily under pressure currently, budgetary, etc. But having this kind of feeling anyway, there are so many NGOs doing great work, so we can step back and they are actually doing it. But it's the responsibility of states, and the UN has a different way of dealing with states than NGOs.
Thank you very much, Manfred. You know the UN better than me, so you know also the political games behind and the difficulties that the person like Najat, who is one of the most dynamic, has. So just to say a hint on what we are doing in the field with the roadmap, the previous roadmap and this one, is that we go to the field, to one country, we build an action plan, we involve the agencies on the spot, UNICEF, UNODC, the local offices, they don't even know what it is. I can tell you that it is a dog. So we do the work to present, to link them with New York, stick to New York, and then together to build an action plan and to implement with the civil society, the UN agency, and government when it's possible. And that's something that we could, all civil society, and the panel is not DCI, it's 170 NGOs, we can go together and we can have results. That's what I see. And that's the aspiration also for the new roadmap. So, for Benoit.
So Benoit, if you're still okay?
A follow-up.
So in your view, Benoit, what are the most critical levers the committee can use to strengthen state accountability for implementing the global study recommendation in this challenging context?
So my first answer to that is probably the future General Comment 27 that will, I hope, bridge a gap concerning access to justice and really making rights a reality or making them more accessible for children. And in this regard, we, of course, the General Comment, you know that the consultation is going on, already addressed many things, but one of the most important dimensions of this General Comment, and I come back to the grassroots actor, is really giving visibility to that work. Because they are the ones who really breach the needs of justice and access to justice from children to the justice system. And when lawyers are saying that they fear those paralegals, they are completely wrong. Those paralegals will help them to do a better job. And we are convinced we have to convince all the people that they need to work together and in better complementarity. So, but also we need to explain what access to justice concretely means. Because what I see, including with all those paralegals, it's that they don't always understand what access to justice means. They can identify very easily violation of children's rights, or children whose rights are not completely respected. They will very often see this in the context of justice for children and so on, but they will not see the whole ranges of rights that are not respected. Access to education, access to health, access to a court when there is a separation of the parents, access to court for victims of sexual violence. All this is extremely important, so we will hopefully provide some guidance to states, and hopefully states will be held more accountable, including in implementing the recommendation and putting in place access to justice at the national level. Then we need also to ensure that all what we are providing as recommendation and decision is implemented at national level. And here we have a big problem, because many states consider that our concluding observations are nice recommendations, but these are not obligations. Our views through OPIC are not binding. We have to work on that. One other example is we also have the mandate to conduct inquiries in case of grave or systematic violation of children's rights. Our first inquiry that was before my time was on Peru, on Chile, and on institution in Chile, and the recommendation that were put to Chile led to a long, hopefully lasting process to change the institutional system. Even there were institutions that had to close down on when the recommendations were published. So these are strong mechanisms that we have to continue using. But I really think that we have, if we want to take the system very seriously, we have to consider that the monitoring body that is put in place by state through those mechanisms and international standards create obligation to states, and those states have to adhere and to follow up on these obligations.
Thank you very much, Benoit. I think we need to leave some space also for the question. But the last question for Anne, if you change again hat, I will ask you to have your academic hat and say how academia, research, but also legal networks can assist, not only for the carers chapter, but you can also touch upon the other chapters. Manfred, I'm sure also with the Global Campus, he can say how you can work on this and how you can assist the implementation of the global study and of the roadmap. Thank you.
Yes, well, I think we've heard a lot about data and the importance of trying to get verified data and understanding. And I do think that academia can play a very big role here, but maybe not the actors that we're used to working with, like lawyers. Maybe we need more economists and data collection experts and so on. In fact, during the global study, we had those amazing academics that were helping us to search through the grey data and all of this kind of thing. So I think those kinds of alliances really can make a difference. And then I think from the accountability perspectives as well, through legal networks, I'm a great believer in law clinics and the fact that law clinics can also work in the whole area of either bringing cases to court or feeding information in as third-party interveners in cases. And also, of course, educating the next generation of lawyers that there are these accountability mechanisms, that there are these standards, and that we need to actively use them. And, for example, something like the optional protocol and the communications procedure is little known, but advertisement, Leiden University Observatory, publishes case notes on these cases. So if you don't want to read through the turgid text of the United Nations Treaty Body communication system, you could just read simplified versions, and we even have child-friendly versions on that site as well. So yes, I think those are some of the ways.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all. But we didn't finish the question. The floor is yours now. Please.
So I
Can you present yourself also before?
Oh yeah, I'm Sara Garcia. I'm with Juvenile Justice Advocates International. I know most of the people most of the speakers. It's an honor to be here and see so many familiar faces, even in the attendee crowd. I totally agree with Professor Manfred that it's not so complicated to ask for data from states because they are already being asked for so much data already. However, I also agree with Najat that there are challenges to it. And I will make my question, but first I will mention a couple of the challenges as representing a grassroots organization. The report, the global study, it is a tool for us. Perhaps support comes in so many other shapes other than funding, though funding obviously is very important. But a seal of collaboration also helps grassroots organizations when we approach states, when we approach governments, asking for data. And we face the same challenges of, I'll mention two. One is definitions. What is pretrial detention? It may be very clear to some of us, but really for states it is not. We have a, not to promote, but we have a parallel session tomorrow, and we will present two case studies. And for example, Costa Rica, which is perceived as a leading actor in matters of children's rights, can apply certain provisions from the adult criminal code to extend pretrial time. So in their perception, they do not go beyond the established statutory limit. So just even that, yes, so just even that, or with this safe homes that could be replaced by detention. So like for us, it's like first definitions is a challenge, and then second is obviously the relationship building to gather data. And here is my question. Because of everything that's going on with international funding cuts and everything, there's a momentum that we are perceiving in the Latin American region for collaboration. We don't have
there are less funding, less organizations as well, but it's the sentiment of solidarity that is bringing us together. Do you think that with that momentum, maybe we can think of not to add another layer of bureaucracy, maybe a roadmap for data collection that is more intentional, hand in hand with grassroots organizations and academia, so that we can provide states with, the foundations of data-driven decisions?
Thank you so much for your question. We will take a few questions so that we gain time. The lady over there.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm coming from the Spanish Committee for UNICEF. Thank you very much, distinguished speakers, for all the information and presentations. Some of you have mentioned the special challenges regarding the situation of migrant children and the worrying trend, as regards these detention procedures. My question is, how could we prevent the new EU pact leading to an increase of migrant detention in Europe? Now we have to be creative in thinking. And I would like to take the opportunity that I have the floor to announce that tomorrow here in this building at 3:30 in room E105, UNICEF, International Detention Coalition and other organizations are organizing a satellite event on working to end child immigration detention in Europe. Just for you.
Thank you so much. IDC is a partner of the NGO panel, and we will be there supporting you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Other question, or we start? Yes, the lady over there, and then we have a round of responses.
Hello, I'm Nimisha Srivastava. I head a non-profit called Council to Secure Justice in India. So I have a suggestion/question. Is there any thinking within the committee about, there was a lot of discussion around writing to states, asking them questions, holding them accountable. Are we, we're talking a lot about child participation. Are we involving children, youth in this holding states accountable? Are we, I am part of this system very much so, and aren't we very set in our ways of just writing these questions to governments and not using, say, for example, social media, other digital mediums at our disposal, and involve children? A child asking a state government that why are you not giving this data to the UNCRC might be more powerful. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. So the floor is back. It's linked to this?
Yes,
yes.
To that question.
But very short, 30 seconds.
Related to legal empowerment, youth participation, I feel like there's already so many layers of stigma for youth who've been involved in the justice system, and that even through some of these legal empowerment initiatives, that's actually a risk for youth who are involved, who have been involved in the system. And so
the question
is, how are we involving youth who've been formerly incarcerated, formerly in contact with the system, so that those are the youth that we're hearing from in a way that's safe for them to participate?
Very good questions. Our panel is coming back. Who is going? I'm sure all of them, they want to respond, but Manfred, you want to start?
On the first question, it took us quite some time at the beginning of the preparation of the global study to develop a questionnaire, which was not too long, not too short, and in this questionnaire we had very, very clear definitions. So when we said how many kids are in your country in pretrial detention, we explained exactly what pretrial detention means. And for governments, it was not that difficult. So all the responses we received from governments, it's not only that the governments directly reported, it was often national preventive mechanisms, national human rights institutions, also collecting data from governments that have not responded. The US, for instance, did not respond, but we got very accurate data on the basis of our definitions. So it's not that difficult to say what do we want to know, and governments do understand. Of course, sometimes they kind of say, okay, certain of these institutions children can leave and that they are not closed institutions, okay, then we get a little bit a lower number than the real number. But that is what we took into account anyway in the extrapolation of the data, and we had very, very good data specialists, statisticians, etc. So it's something, it's doable. And in fact, we got fairly reliable data when we then send out this questionnaire to all the different stakeholders. And only on the last question, I mean, we did involve, I think, 274 children, if I'm correct, in 22 countries that were directly, so those were children who had experiences with deprivation of liberty. In all our regional consultations, national consultations, we always also involved children. So for us, the participation of children was one of the most important principles, but also a very important source of information. I leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Benoit, perhaps adding something else on
yes,
this?
Concerning child participation, I will pick that question because it's very important. Very briefly, at the level of the committee, what we have been doing is receiving delegation of children in the pre-session period to receive their input and try to collect information from their experience. It's not perfect, and there are many criticisms that we can have concerning this way of doing things, but at least it exists. It used to exist. Because to be frank and clear, in the future we may not have pre-sessional work anymore, so that we will probably not have the space to accommodate children. So we will have to reinvent child participation at that level. And we will continue trying to reach out to children, but maybe more at distance in finding right ways. But for me, child participation has to start at national level and even local level. And so we have to ensure that this is the place where it starts. And children have to learn what participation means at school, in their communities, in their families, and this is where it starts. And then trying to bring their voice at another level, which is extremely important. And we have seen so many examples where they make the difference. And indeed, when children are asking their own states and holding them accountable about what they are doing, it can be very strong, as long as it is done safely and without putting them at risk or creating more harm. So these are the conditions.
Thank you, Benoit. Anne, from you, any last?
I think Benoit and Manfred answered the question.
Okay.
I think there was only one question, migrants.
Yes,
The migrant children. I mean, of course, we are living in a time when there's anti-migration policies are getting stronger and stronger, not only in the US, but also in Europe. But still, I think it's a good practice that Belgium, after Ireland, was the second European or EU member state that actually abolished migration detention center. There are quite a number of Latin American states that prohibited the abolished migration detention centers because there are always other less intrusive measures that you can do, even if you have a fairly strict anti-migration policy. So it's doable. It's only a question of political will, and that is probably in the moment not very strong.
Thank you so much. If there is no other urgent question, we have exceeded a bit, but there is no problem. We count on you to help us finalize this roadmap. It will be our roadmap. It's not DCI's, not even the NGO panels. And together with Manfred, with academia, with the CRC, with the Legal Empowerment Fund, continue the implementation, because I think we are just on the beginning of something very important. Thank you so much, and thank you also to our YouTube